one note off, it sounds terrible. And so there's certain rules of harmony in music. And why that is, well, music is based on proportion and mathematical proportions. Actually, it's all of that. There's a strong connection between mathematics and music. But there is an unmistakable lack of harmony when somebody plays the wrong note. You can tell right away. Somebody, you know it's coming, you hear just one note off, like on a piano or something like that. Right away somebody hit a blooper. Only once I can think of in a concert I heard one performer actually hit a false note. It was a violinist. It was very hard to play the violin. He was playing Vivaldi, very fast. I heard it. So harmony is the perfection. There's an order, you see. So, however, as Aristotle shows, order is a disposition by way of priority and posteriority in relation to some principle. That's the definition of order. So that means something comes before and something comes after, according to some principle. So in the case of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they are in order on the principle of ascending magnitude. But if you jumble them all up, then there's disorder, according to that principle. So there has to be a principle. This is found analogically in magnitude, numbers, motions, knowledge, love, action, and in the hierarchy of beings. So some animals are more perfect than others. They have greater sensitivity, a greater, you might say, sensitive intelligence than others, and even in some breeds are better than others within the breed, within the like dogs or there's a grade, there's an order in everything. I mean, we don't realize it, we just take it for granted, but there's a tremendous order. Just the fact that the leaves fall in the winter and then they all come back in the spring. We take these things for granted, and the sun rises all at the same time. The moon, we can predict the moon. We can tell when the moon's going to have an eclipse, and sure enough, right down to the minute it happens. It's a tremendous order, and so we take it for granted, but it's remarkable. So hence, according to this definition, order is more perfect to the degree that more things are disposed in a more united fashion in relation to some principle. So, for example, if you have a great disparity of things, but which are united into a unity, that is remarkable. Think of the big rose windows in Notre Dame in Paris. Those are 50 feet wide. That's a lot. And they are, many diverse things, all these saints and all these colors and everything, all united in this big circle with the spokes on it and everything. And that's why it's beautiful, because it is a diversity united in a single principle of order. And that's what makes it beautiful, because by nature they're diverse things, but it's very mathematically, all Gothic is very mathematical. So the fact that many diverse things can be unified in an order is remarkable, and the more diverse they are, the more the order is remarkable because of the fact that it unifies them. Therefore, this perfection of order or harmony is all the greater to the degree that a more profound unity is found in greater diversity, as in the universe, all of whose parts are ordered to each other and to God. So the whole universe operates according to principles. Also, for example, it's one thing to play chopsticks on the piano. It's another thing to play a Bach fugue on the organ. In a fugue, you have four different voices talking to each other, so to speak, all in a linear pattern that do not contradict each other. They are sort of woven together into one big musical piece. That is much more remarkable than playing chopsticks on the piano. Yes, there is harmony when you know what chopsticks are. You know what that means? No. It's what all students learn first. They do chords, and I forget how it goes, but in other words, some simple piece that a student might play is, yes, it has harmony and it has melody and everything, but it's not as complex as some big Bach fugue, and that's the beauty of the Bach fugue, is that he organizes all of it into one big harmonious piece. So, and then you can do a double fugue too. That means you're doing two melody lines instead of one melody line that is, organized according to the four parts: soprano, tenor, baritone, bass. You have two melodies going that way. So Mozart did that in the Kyrie of the Requiem. That's a double fugue. It's extremely difficult to do. And he also did it in the Cum Sancto Spiritu of the Mozart's Mass in C minor. That's a masterpiece of double fugue. But you have to know that, you have to appreciate it. You have to. Most people don't. But you hear the different voices going, and then they're all blended together, something like a fabric or something like that, or a tapestry, all pulled together, and then it all comes together at the end. So anyway, the more diversity there is, the greater the marvel of the order, because the principle is organizing all of that into one thing. So that's one of the elements of beauty, is organizing diversity into a single thing. That's why building is beautiful, or if the architecture is all balanced and where it's what it should be, so to speak. Now, harmony is required for a beauty which, according to St. Thomas, includes three things: integrity, as regards the multitude involved, at least of power, I mean, saltem virtutis, due proportion. So in other words, something, if it lacks integrity, say like a wedding cake where somebody has bitten a piece out of it, think of that lacks integrity. Okay. Like, I mean, that's a nice cake, but there's something wrong with it. A due proportion. Proportion is extremely important in architecture, proportion, where things are not too big or too small, and one in relation to the other. And the greatest sins of art are usually in proportion, especially architecture. As regards the unity of order, and clarity or splendor, as regards the manifestation of order in a number of parts or attributes. So you have to have clarity. That's why modern art is so horrible, because there's no clarity. What is it? You look at it, somebody threw paint on a canvas, it's meaningless. It says nothing to the intellect. It has to have clarity, and clarity in such a way that nobody has to tell you anything. Its message, you might say, is very clear. So anyway, as regards human life, already in the natural life, beauty is an order of reason that per se is essentially is found in the contemplation of truth, though participatively in the moral virtues. So you can have moral beauty. So you see that in, say, the martyrdom of a young girl who ordinarily would be given to fear, but has tremendous courage and is martyred. St. Agnes, for example, St. Lucy, she's coming up. That's moral beauty. On the nature of what is truly sublime, it seems that this term comes from the expression of sublimine celi, up to the threshold of heaven. Limine, I'm sorry. In order to designate that which is most loftily situated in the air. And even if men abuse this word quite often, they say that, properly speaking, sublime signifies something that belongs to the loftiest and most extraordinary place in the order of beauty, especially that of intellectual and moral beauty. Now, from the aforementioned definitions of order, beauty, and harmony, we can say that sublimity appears most especially in the loftiest and most intimate union of various things that are most distant from each other. See, that is, of the loftiest and the lowliest. So if it incorporates both high and low together, that is sublime. On account of this distance, such a union, which at first glance seems to be impossible, is utterly marvelous and arouses tears of admiration. Such is the case for the way that supreme mercy is inclined toward lifting us out of our misery, or the union of infinite justice with immense mercy. See, justice wants retribution, mercy wants forgiveness. And in God, those things are, he's all merciful and he's all just. So, and we don't know how they are connected, but they are connected, obviously, in God. He is his mercy and he is his justice. So there's various explanations that even when he's just, he is merciful, and when he's merciful, he's just. So, but that's all, you see that in De Deo. This is also true for the intimate reconciliation of the greatest strength and perfect sweetness found in martyrdom, what I just said. By contrast, the discord found in the delusions of false mysticism rouse one to laughter. So, thus defined, the sublime, in the order of intellectual and moral beauty, is in a way akin to what a miracle is in the sensible order, namely something extraordinary. You could not achieve that sublimity without, in an ordinary way. Thus, as we will discuss below, just as a miracle is above and not opposed to nature, so too the sublime is above the customary order of things intellectual and moral, and not opposed thereto. So, just as the miracle is not opposed to nature, because God is the author of physical laws and he can supersede them if he wants. And so also the sublime is not opposed to the ordinary, because it is by divine origin, it is possible that these things happen. Modernists wish to see in this marvelous life of the church only something unknown that has not yet been historically and psychologically explained, namely the natural mystery of religious evolution. By contrast, what we must show here is that something supernatural is indeed found in this marvelous life. The sublimity at the basis of our argument is indicated by St. Paul in Ephesians when he says, "You may be able to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, to know also the charity of Christ, which surpasseth all knowledge, that you may be filled unto all the fullness of God." Do you know when that epistle occurs? Anybody? The Feast of the Sacred Heart. As the commonly held breadth is extension to the parts of the universe, length to at all times past and future, height to the loftiest mysteries of God, and depth to the worst evil, or the obstinacy to be punished, so that all things cooperate in the good to the salvation of souls and the glory of God. So even persecutions by Roman soldiers, or that all works for good. The value of these various motives must be considered part by part. Okay. Purity and sublimity of doctrine. The divine origin of a given teaching can be at least morally certain on the basis of a threefold consideration of this doctrine: A, considered in itself; B, with regard to the way it is proposed; and C, in regard to the way it has been constituted. So, the doctrine considered in itself. One sign of the divine origin of a religion is found in the doctrine that it proposes in the name of God marvelously united what is greatest and what is least, supernatural things and natural things, the riches of the divine mercy and the misery of mankind, preserving the rights of justice which are proposed to all men of all nations and times, gathering together what is oldest and most new, so that even though the mysteries thus handed on may be obscure, they appear as being most excellently connected together with each other, as well as with man's ultimate end. The Catholic liturgy of the Roman Rite says, God gives peace, reconciling in himself the lowliest with the loftiest. However, this is made manifest specifically as regards to natural truths, inasmuch as this doctrine exceeds by far all the systems of philosophers and other religions, proposing nothing that reason would show to be false, and perfectly teaches all things that pertain to natural religion concerning God's existence, nature, attributes, providence, and creation, as well as concerning man's origin, nature, and end, along with those truths concerning moral precepts and counsels, so that it fully suffices for rightly establishing a way of life for man, and indeed perfectly responds to all of man's legitimate aspirations. So we're going to say that this pertains to the Catholic Church. No religion has a morality as strict as the Catholic Church. None. The fact that you can't divorce your wife and remarry, for example. Of all the things, that is probably the most objectionable to non-Catholics, you might say. In other words, even the Jews said, "How could anyone live?" That's what they said to our Lord. It's impossible. But nonetheless, and St. Paul is explicit about that. That you can't marry again if you put your wife away. You can put your wife away for a serious reason. That means separate. But you can't remarry. In one of his epistles, he says that very explicitly, which destroys any religion that claims to be Christian and at the same time approves of divorce and remarriage. And that would be true of the Greek Orthodox. You can divorce and remarry in the Greek Orthodox, but watch that go down the tubes. In other words, Leo there's so much that he has to compromise in order to get them to even think about reconciling. It's either going to be some patch up where they remain exactly the way they are, and we don't say anything, but we're in full communion. That's probably what is going to come, because he would have to trash so many Catholic dogmas. They are not going to trash anything. Furthermore, both times in which their hierarchy reconciled with the Catholic Church, both times when they went back to their people and the people rejected it, and that's going to be the same thing in this case. Those Greeks want nothing to do with Rome, absolutely nothing to do with Rome, and their clergy might be happy with it, but they won't accept it. They won't even accept some sort of Band-Aid approach. They don't want anything to do with it. So, but he's going to have to dump a bunch of Catholic dogmas. So, as regards to mysteries as supernatural things proposed, the divine origin of a religion is thus manifested, inasmuch as these mysteries, as well as the duties correlative to them, notwithstanding their obscurity and inaccessible loftiness, seem to be most greatly conformed to the naturally knowable attributes of God and our nature's aspirations. likewise calling for the mortification of the wicked inclinations of our sensuality and pride. All that is true of the Catholic faith. This argument is reinforced if, as Pascal said, by these mysteries it should also explain both man's misery as well as the nobility of his desires for supreme things, likewise offering a remedy for this misery. So he's the one that said, he was a Jansenist, but he did say some true things. He said, as much as original sin is mysterious, man is more mysterious without it. In other words, why is man so inclined to evil? Obvious evil, things that everyone would say are evil. Why is he inclined to those things? If there's not some principle in him that inclines, which would be the effects of original sin. And yet he's capable of nobility of his desires. In other words, he's capable of great virtue. How do you put together those two things? Yeah, that's what and he admires virtue, and also the Catholic faith offers a remedy for this misery. In other words, to make people virtuous, to make them overcome their inclinations to sin. So, by contrast, false mysticism proposes the absurd delusions of exaltation and falls into a sub-rational sensualism. I don't know exactly what he means by false mysticism, but in any case, it's not important. So the aforementioned doctrine is divine on account of these marvelous notes. For what human reason was not able to accomplish in so many philosophers, following upon the exertion of such great labors, manifestly surpasses, at least morally, the natural powers of man teaching this body of doctrine, or the powers of many men teaching this same doctrine firmly and without any division among themselves. At the very least, it is evident that without supernatural assistance, it would be morally impossible to constitute this teaching as regards the sum of natural truth of religion, and to order so befittingly such mysteries which are proposed as being supernatural. So the idea is you could not have success in producing a religion like the Catholic religion based on merely natural intellectual abilities, to put it all together, in other words. Cardinal Zigliara, late 19th century. Indeed, it is morally impossible that the man who says this on his own, that is, from the light of reason, would always and in all things pursue the truth. For sometimes he falls into error, even fluctuates between opposed opinions, and gets caught up in contradictions. However, where truth always exists, where no opposition exists in those things which are said by one person, or something even more marvelous, really, by many, who say that they speak through divine inspiration, this is a sign that the doctrine in question does not come from man, but rather from God, especially if the preaching of it is concerned with the loftiest mysteries of God. Also based on the goodness of this doctrine, it is manifest that it does not come from an evil spirit, something confirmed by comparing it with superstitions that suggest the basest of things concerning God. So you might say the primitive religions, and even Protestantism, where divorce and remarriage is condoned, and various other things are condoned, and where you have private inspiration and private judgment, and you can really decide anything for yourself. You can moralize yourself and decide what's good and bad for you. I mean, that opens the door to just about everything. Similarly, this argument is confirmed if the apostles enjoy such an abundance of wisdom that all of their adversaries are not able to resist them or contradict them. Hence, in 1 Corinthians, St. Paul places words of wisdom first among the various freely given graces when he says, "To one indeed by the Spirit is given the word of wisdom, to another the word of knowledge, according to the same Spirit, to another faith in the same Spirit, to another the grace of healing in one Spirit, to to another the working of miracles, to another prophecy, to another the discerning of spirits, to another diverse kinds of tongues, to another interpretation of speeches. Right. So those are the various gifts that were given in the early church, but wisdom is the highest. Wisdom is to see all things the way God sees them. That's the definition of wisdom. It's the highest of the intellectual virtues. So, doctrine in relation to the way it is preached, this pertains to the grace of words, which is given so that the divine truth may be readily accessible, delightful, and moving. In other words, that it may illuminate the intellect, piously delight the affect, that means the will, and efficaciously move the will to fulfill God's commands. So in relation to its illumination, a given harmony is marvelous if the loftiest mysteries are taught with the greatest of authority, together with simplicity and humility, in a way that is accommodated to the understanding of all men coming from various times and peoples. So, for example, the Gospels are able to be understood by anybody. So if you read Plato's, Aristotle, forget it. But the Gospels are just available to everybody, so by contrast, philosophers often speak about the loftiest of things only in a probable manner, doing so with such abstractness that these truths can only be understood by the wise, what I just said. Moreover, they often lack simplicity and humility. Similarly, neither could true illumination proceed from a false religion, which either tends toward the delusions of false mysticism or is inclined to naturalism, being unable to reconcile grace with nature. See, that is the big theological bugaboo, is reconciling grace and nature. Because the tendency is to sin either on the side of grace or sin on the side of nature. And those, when I say sin, to be erroneous on the side of grace, that would be pseudo-supernaturalism, such as Protestantism. You got the Spirit, no? Or naturalism, where you drag down God. You see, so grace and nature are the two poles, you might say, but there is a way in which to reconcile them, you might say, because in a certain way they're opposed. For example, how grace is operative without violating your free will, that has been the source of so much discussion over the ages. That's the big fight with the Jesuits and the Dominicans. But the Dominicans say, we don't know. Ultimately, it's a supernatural mystery, but that they are not opposed. God is the author of nature. He's the author of grace. So they cannot be opposed. And free will cannot be violated. God would have to destroy your will. He cannot actually, because it's of the nature of will to be free. So he would have to destroy your will, but he could not violate it once it is created. So grace has to, in some way, work with your free will, that you are moved to do something but God can very efficaciously move your free will, as you see in various saints. Saint Matthew, for example. Various others. Come follow me. Goes to St. Peter and put down your nets. And he moves sinners. People pray for sinners and they come back, and things that you would say are impossible happen. This is 12. 10. Okay. Great. Oh. Excuse me. I'd stand for this.